Austin suspected that his wife was lying. A third massage this week, late returns, a shower before bed. Everything seemed suspicious. One day, he decided to follow her. What he saw at the massage parlor changed everything. He found out who was touching his wife. And now, he's ready for revenge. Austin sat on the couch, staring at his phone, but he could barely see the screen. His mind was occupied with something else. Beryl had gone for a massage again. The third time this week. She had never been so fond of such procedures before. She might have gone to the salon once a month, and even then, only because of back pain after workouts. But now everything had changed. Now she was running to massages as if her life depended on it. Austin lifted his head and looked at the clock. 11:17 p.m. Beryl had left home 2 hours ago. "I might be late, honey," she had texted him half an hour ago. Austin replied with a short, "Okay," but his fingers gripped the phone tighter than they should have. His wife had changed. Her kisses had become colder, their conversations shorter. She had started taking a shower every time she came back from her massage. Her eyes no longer lingered on him as they once did. Austin wasn't a fool. Something was wrong. He just didn't know what yet. Beryl returned close to midnight. Austin lay in bed, pretending to be asleep. He heard the lock click, heard her quietly take off her heels, heard her walk into the shower. Always the shower. When she came back into the bedroom, he barely opened his eyes to look at her. She stood in front of the mirror in a short robe, rubbing some lotion into her skin. Her body looked relaxed, almost satisfied. Austin shut his eyes and pretended he hadn't seen anything. But now he was certain. This wasn't just a regular massage, and he was going to prove it. The next day, Austin left work a little earlier. He found the website of the very massage salon Beryl had been going to. Relax Massage Studio. A well-designed page, soft colors, professional photos. Everything looked very decent, but something about it didn't sit right with him. He scrolled through the list of services. Classic massage, relaxing, therapeutic. Then his eyes caught on one particular line. Exclusive women's massage. For those looking for more than just a procedure. What did that mean? Austin clicked on the description. But there was nothing specific. Just one sentence. Trust our masters, and you will feel truly special. He felt something tighten in his stomach. His wife had been visiting this women's massage several times a week, and by the looks of it, she had been feeling special. Austin picked up his phone and dialed the number. Relax Massage Studio, how can I help you? A soft female voice answered. Good afternoon, Austin said. I'd like to book a massage. Of course. What type are you interested in? You know, my wife comes to you for the exclusive women's massage, and she really enjoys it. I'd like something similar. A brief pause fell on the other end of the line. I'm sorry, but that's a special service available only to women. Austin nearly clenched his phone. Why? That's our establishment's policy. Another short pause. Then she added, almost whispering, it's a special experience that men usually don't seek out. Austin felt a wave of anger rise inside him, but he kept his cool. I see. Thank you. He hung up. His wife had been going to a massage that was only available to women, a service that men usually don't seek out. Now, he had serious suspicions, but it wasn't enough. He needed proof, and he was going to get it. Austin decided to take the next step. The next day, he told Beryl he would be staying late at work. Instead, he parked near the massage salon and started waiting. He knew her schedule, and he wasn't wrong. 5 minutes later, she got out of her car and quickly disappeared through the salon doors. Austin waited for them to close, then got out of his own car. He pulled up his hood and entered the salon, pretending to be a customer. Behind the reception desk sat the administrator, the same woman who had spoken to him on the phone. Good afternoon, she greeted him. Afternoon, Austin said. I'd like to book a massage. He pretended to look around. The interior was cozy, dim lighting, a quiet, relaxing playlist. But he felt like something was off. What exactly are you interested in? The administrator asked. Austin smiled. I'd like to get the same service as my wife. The administrator tensed. I'm sorry, but as I mentioned before, I'll pay double. He placed a few bills on the counter. The woman hesitated. But then she glanced at the money and said, "Wait here." She disappeared behind a door. Austin felt adrenaline surge through him. He needed to find out the truth, and he was almost there. A minute later, the door opened, and standing in the doorway was a tall, muscular man in a white robe. The masseur. He cast a quick glance at Austin. Then he smiled. "Can I help you?" His voice was too confident. Austin clenched his fists. He knew this man had touched his wife, but he didn't yet know how far it had gone. But he would find out. He would figure it out, and then he would make them regret it. Austin stood in the lobby of the massage salon, staring at the man in front of him, tall, athletic, with a perfect smile and a self-assured gaze. The masseur, the very same man Beryl had been visiting for weeks. "Can I help you?" he repeated. Austin felt something grow cold inside him. His hands instinctively clenched into fists, but he forced himself to relax. Not now. First, he had to learn the truth. "Yes," Austin replied, trying to keep his voice as calm as possible. "I've heard a lot of good things about your salon and wanted to experience your services myself." The receptionist behind the desk glanced at the masseur, as if waiting for his reaction. The man didn't take his eyes off Austin, as if trying to assess his intentions. "We usually work by appointment only," he finally said. Austin nodded. "I understand. But maybe you have an opening right now?" The masseur pretended to think for a moment, then looked at the receptionist. "Actually, you do have a small window." She paused. "Would you like a classic massage, or something special?" Austin tensed slightly. "What do you mean by special?" The woman smiled slyly. "Some clients enjoy an exclusive approach." The masseur kept his face neutral, but something cautious flickered in his eyes. Austin played along, acting intrigued. "And how does that work?" "We start with a standard massage, and then you decide for yourself how comfortable you are," the receptionist answered. Now Austin was almost certain. This place offered more than just massages. And Beryl wasn't coming here just for relaxation. "All right," he said. "Let's give it a try." They led him into a massage room, a cozy space with dim lighting, candles, and the scent of essential oils in the air. The masseur stood next to the massage table, flexing his fingers. "My name is Victor," he said. "Undress to your comfort level and lie down on your stomach." Austin did as he was told. He lay down, feeling tension ripple through his body. Victor started with a light back massage, running smooth motions along his spine. Austin realized almost immediately why Beryl might have liked it. But he also knew that this wasn't everything. He needed to find out more. "Your wife comes here too, right?" Victor asked casually. Austin tensed slightly. "Yes. She recommended you to me." "Beryl is a beautiful woman," Victor said, pressing harder. Austin didn't respond. He focused on every word the masseur was saying. "She has sensitive muscles," Victor continued, "but I already know how to work with them." His tone was too familiar, as if he knew her body far better than just as a client. "She says the massage helps her a lot," Austin said, trying to sound nonchalant. "That's true," Victor paused. "Some women need a special approach." Austin barely stopped himself from lifting his head. "And what kind of approach is that?" The masseur hesitated for a second. Then he added, "It depends on how open they are to new sensations." Austin understood. Now, there was no doubt left. Beryl wasn't coming here for a massage. She was coming for this. His stomach twisted with anger, but he didn't let it show. "Sounds interesting," he said, forcing a smile. Victor continued the massage as if nothing had happened. But Austin knew. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. He got home earlier than expected. Beryl was sitting on the couch, watching a show. She looked up when he walked in. "Oh, you're home early." Austin smiled. "Yeah, plans changed." He walked into the bathroom, closed the door, and turned on the water. Then, he pulled out his phone and opened the voice recorder. He had recorded the entire conversation with Victor. Every single word. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. He looked at himself in the mirror. He was no longer the Austin who believed in his wife's loyalty. That man had died today, and in his place was someone else. Someone planning revenge. That night, he couldn't sleep. Beryl lay next to him, breathing evenly. Her body was so familiar, so close, and yet, so foreign. His wife, the woman who had betrayed him. His jaw clenched. He would make her regret it, but not yet. Let her think nothing had changed. Let her relax, because when he struck, it would be unexpected and irreversible. That evening, Austin sat in the kitchen, sipping cold coffee, his gaze clouded with thoughts. He played the recording from his phone once more, listening to Victor's voice over and over again. Every word sounded like a sentence. They spoke so freely, so openly, as if they had nothing to hide. Austin felt his blood boil, his hands gripping the phone tightly. What was he supposed to do next? Meeting Victor was only the beginning. The masseur clearly knew how to work with women, and the fact that Beryl had chosen him was no coincidence. Maybe he had become something more to her than just a therapist. Austin could only imagine what kind of embrace she returned to him with after those sessions. But this wasn't just betrayal. This was manipulation. This was a game, and he was ready to play by her rules, but on his own terms. The next day, Austin came home earlier than usual. He already knew Beryl was becoming more and more unpredictable, and today, he planned to uncover another part of her secret. But at that moment, he noticed a small handwritten note on the table. It seemed to be left for him. Austin, I've known everything for a long time. I was just waiting for the right moment. The first thought that crossed his mind was that this was a trap, that one of her friends was playing a joke, trying to confuse him. But each word was written in handwriting he recognized immediately, Beryl's. She couldn't just leave him without a response, without an explanation. Something in her eyes had changed today, and his thoughts only deepened the mystery. Through the kitchen window, Austin noticed Beryl leaving the house, calm and composed, as always. But today, her movement seemed more confident than usual. She wasn't in a hurry. She wasn't trying to hide her intentions. She was walking toward her car, but she didn't seem to know she was being watched. Austin decided that today, he would completely figure her out. A few hours later, he was standing outside that same massage parlor, the place where he had once uncovered the terrifying truth about his wife. This place had become familiar to him. But today, he wasn't here as a regular visitor. His plans had changed. Today, he wasn't just here to find out more. Today, he wanted answers. I know you're here, and I'm ready for you to tell me everything. He walked through the door and immediately spotted Victor. The masseur was standing by the reception desk, talking to the receptionist. Their eyes met for a split second. Victor raised his eyebrows slightly in surprise, but quickly returned to his conversation. Austin felt like he was in the middle of some kind of chaotic puzzle, where nothing was as it seemed. Are you here for another one of your usual visits? Victor spoke suddenly, approaching him with that same self-assured look. Austin didn't respond immediately. His thoughts were moving faster than usual. He already knew this meeting wouldn't be like the last. I'd like to talk to you about your work, Austin finally said, keeping his voice steady, controlled. Victor looked at him, evaluating. His expression didn't reveal anything, but Austin noticed how he briefly hesitated, as if resisting some unseen pressure. What exactly are you interested in? Victor replied, though there was a hint of caution in his tone. I'm curious, how many clients, like my wife, trust you? Austin asked, locking eyes with the masseur. This time, Victor couldn't fully mask his reaction. His gaze flickered, just for a moment, but Austin caught it. He understood what he meant. Your wife is very special, Victor started, but his words were cut off by the sudden ringing of a phone. Austin didn't move. His intuition told him he was on the right track. He kept watching Victor, gathering more and more pieces of the puzzle. Victor silenced his phone and turned back to Austin, but his face no longer looked so composed. His choice of words had become harder. For the first time, it seemed like he understood. His time was running out. The tension was rising. When Austin got home, his heart was pounding. He felt like he was on the verge of unraveling everything. Something big was waiting for him, and he was ready to uncover it, even if it meant facing the most painful truth. But when he stepped inside the apartment, what he saw surpassed all his expectations. Beryl was standing in the doorway, smiling at him. Austin, I know that you know everything. She stood there, her gaze steady, but there was something else in her eyes, a strange spark, something he hadn't noticed before. He didn't know why, but at that moment, her confidence unsettled him. The last time they had spoken, she had been guarded, silent. But now, she stood before him as if she were already offering an explanation, without saying a word. Austin took a step forward but didn't come too close. His eyes stayed locked on her face, on her movements, too relaxed, too in control. If things were as simple as they seemed, she wouldn't look this calm. "I know everything," Beryl said with certainty, but in her voice, there was something else. Exhaustion. "You found out, didn't you?" Austin didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and handed her the voice recording. She fell silent for a moment as she took it from him. Then, she pressed play. Victor, her masseur, the man she had so openly used. Beryl closed her eyes. Her expression was distant, as if she was trying to drown out her own thoughts. She placed the phone on the table and turned back to him. "I couldn't hide it anymore, Austin." Her voice was empty, emotionless, like she was tired of the entire performance. "He gave me everything that you didn't." Austin felt those words tear through him. She spoke without guilt, without regret. Was this the truth, or just another manipulation? "But that's not what I meant," she added, and suddenly, her eyes burned with something else, something different. "I know you found out about Victor, but there's something else, something you don't know yet." Austin froze. He didn't understand. What was she talking about? What else was there to uncover? Had he only scratched the surface? "What are you trying to say?" Austin finally spoke, feeling each word cut into him like a blade. Beryl laughed. But it wasn't a normal laugh. It was filled with irony, disappointment, mystery. "You think you know the whole truth?" Her tone turned cold. "But everything you know is only what I allowed you to see. Victor, he's just the beginning." Austin didn't understand what she meant, but his instinct screamed that something serious was happening, and he wasn't ready for it. "What else?" he asked again, trying to keep his composure, though his heart was pounding so hard he could hear each beat. Beryl looked at him silently, then took a step back. Her fingers clenched into a fist. "I didn't just cheat on you with Victor," she said. "I cheated on you with your friend, with John." The words froze him. Austin felt his world start to crumble. John, his friend. They had been together all this time. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. John? That was all he could say. Beryl looked at him without a hint of remorse, as if she had already stepped into a world where Austin no longer mattered. "Yes," she said, and it was terrifyingly honest. "He was always there, always the one giving me what you couldn't. Remember that night when we made up after one of our fights? That night, I went to him. You didn't even notice." Austin felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. His heart clenched, his breathing grew heavy. How had this happened? How had he not seen it? And then, it all made sense. Beryl had always had a plan B, and a plan C. Victor was just a piece of the puzzle. John was another part of this dark web. But this was just the beginning. Austin decided he wouldn't be a passive player in this game anymore. He had to act. But how? As Beryl got into her car, ready to leave their home, Austin realized one thing. Now, he had to turn the game against her. Something inside him ignited. He was no longer the weak man who tried to keep everything under control. This time, he would play by his own rules. And when Beryl came back, she wouldn't find the man sitting in the corner, waiting for revenge. She would find a man ready to expose new secrets, but on his terms. Austin didn't know how to start his revenge yet, but the fire inside him burned too brightly to ignore. Everything he had been through, it all seemed like a piece of something bigger, something he had been dragged into because of his own naivety. But now, he refused to be just an observer. She had betrayed him with John, and he had never realized his friend was part of this twisted game. With each new revelation, a wave of rage surged inside him. But so did new ideas. Ideas that would allow him to put the pieces together. He needed to understand where this all began, and how he would end it. Austin sat in his room, replaying all the recordings he had collected about Beryl. When his phone rang, John's name flashed on the screen. Now this was interesting. "Austin, I want to talk." John's voice came through. It was the kind of voice Austin recognized as a warning sign. John was never someone you could easily read. His manipulations, his ability to hide behind a second persona, it had always been part of his game. You betrayed me, John. Austin didn't waste time on politeness. His voice was calm, but inside, his soul was burning. I know, John answered without hesitation. No excuses, no justifications, just cold acceptance. What do you want? Austin asked, feeling the power of his actions pushing the situation toward its climax. I want to fix everything. John's voice was quiet. But I don't think you understand what's really happening. This is bigger than just betrayal, Austin. Austin smirked. And what do you want me to understand, John? His voice was steady, but there was a hint of danger. And that was when John said something that changed everything. I'm not alone. You have no idea who's really behind all of this. Then, John hung up. Austin sat there, staring at the screen. A few words. And now, his world had shifted again. Who was they? Who was really pulling the strings? Had Beryl just been a piece of something much bigger? The moment John ended the call, Austin forced himself to focus. He knew he couldn't just sit back and wait for the truth to reveal itself. He had to act, and act fast. One thing was clear. He wasn't just a spectator in this game anymore. He needed to know more. Beryl returned home when it was already late. He decided not to wait until tomorrow. He had a sort of plan. And to find out more, he needed to turn to those who could give him information, to the people who held secrets. His first step was to visit one of the places where she often went, the restaurant where one of her former friends worked. Larry, the bartender. He was unknown to Austin, but he definitely knew more than anyone. Approaching the bar, he noticed how Larry paused for a moment when he saw him. Larry's appearance was wary. What happened, Larry? Austin asked, sitting at the bar. I don't know what you want to find out, Larry nervously replied. I don't know anything. You will definitely find out. Austin's voice was firm, even threatening. He felt how each word forced Larry to come clean. The bartender looked at him, a little nervous, and then agreed. Maybe I know a little more than you think. You're right. I was one of the ones who saw her go into the room, with that same man who became part of her game. Austin held his breath. Who is he? This was his last attempt to find an answer. He needed the truth. Larry finally, having no other choice, gave the name. Victor. The same masseur. And not only him. I saw how she organized it all. But there was another man, the one she was in love with. He also worked close to her. Austin was stunned. His former friend was just part of the betrayal. And there was someone else behind all of this. It became clear to him. The betrayal was no longer one-sided. Now, he had to confront not only Beryl and her friends. Now, he had to deal with those who manipulated him and someone else. The night was outside, and Austin returned home with a new idea. He could now control the situation more. But was he ready for what else lay in the world he had just uncovered for himself? Austin woke up in the morning, his mind filled with new discoveries and plans. He had all the tools to figure out what was happening, and now it had become his mission. He could no longer afford to be naive. The betrayal of his wife was just the tip of the iceberg, and he intended to find out who was behind all the manipulations. The previous night with Larry left more questions than answers. Victor, the masseur, and the mysterious man who worked near Beryl, this was still not the full picture. Now Austin understood that he had fallen into a complicated game where everyone played by their own rules. But he also knew that he had a key advantage. He could start moving this game before everyone realized who they were dealing with. He sat on the couch, checking his phone, when suddenly he received a new message. It was from John, his friend. The text was short, but extremely important. You don't even realize who's behind all of this. Victor is just part of the plan. Beryl is no longer your problem. Austin felt a heaviness in his chest. This message confirmed all his suspicions. It was much more complicated than he had thought. Victor and Beryl were just the beginning. Now, it seemed, there were other figures influencing all of this, and his unexpected discoveries were becoming more absurd. But he couldn't stand still. He needed to act. Ultimately, he decided he would go to the place where Victor worked and speak with him directly. If he was indeed part of this game, he had to pay for his actions. When Austin arrived at the place where the masseur worked, he began to feel his body tense. His plan was simple. talk to Victor, find out what he knew, and force him to tell the truth. But every step he took raised more questions. How could he be sure that Victor would really give him the truth? How could he tell if this was still part of a bigger game? He entered the building, and his gaze immediately fell on Victor. The masseur was sitting at a desk, arms crossed, looking very calm, as if he wasn't worried about either the situation or Austin. This didn't look like an ordinary masseur. This was not just a man with a job. He was some sort of strategist, waiting for his time. "Victor," Austin said, approaching the desk. "We need to talk." Victor looked up and smiled. "Austin, did you know that this is only the beginning?" His voice was incredibly calm. This was just another part of the big game he was involved in. "What do you mean?" Austin asked, not understanding what was happening. "You don't understand. This isn't just about your wife anymore, and it's not just about what you think. Everything that's happening, it's all part of the plan." Austin felt his heartbeat quicken. He couldn't grasp what Victor meant. A plan? What plan? And why was he part of it? Victor paused, giving him a moment to process. "We've been in this game for a long time, Austin. You don't even understand who your wife really was. Beryl, she was just what led you here." "I'm not going to listen to your manipulations," Austin snapped, but his pulse was racing. Victor continued as if he hadn't heard him. "Do you really want to know the truth? Then listen. Your wife was part of something much bigger than you ever imagined. She didn't just betray you with John and the others. She was part of a larger scheme where everyone played their role." Austin started feeling like the ground was slipping from under his feet. What was he about to learn? And what was he supposed to do with this information? "You want to know who's behind all of this?" Victor went on. "It's your friend, John." Austin shook his head. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. "John? How is that possible?" "No way." "John?" Victor simply smiled. "Yes. He's the one who orchestrated everything. He used you as his tool. He wants to destroy you, and right now, you're just a piece of his game. This isn't just about your wife's betrayal. This is an attack on your life, Austin." The words echoed in his mind like thunder in a clear sky. Everything he had believed in, everything he thought he knew about his wife, about his friend, suddenly meant nothing. His entire world had turned upside down. Now, he had no choice but to step into the darkness and figure out who was truly pulling the strings. Austin stood in that room, unable to believe his ears. John. He had never imagined that his best friend could be part of this nightmare. His thoughts swirled, making it hard to focus. Each moment felt darker and darker. Victor sat calmly, his cold smile unwavering, as if this was just another game. "You can't be serious, John? You don't have any proof?" Austin's words were filled with doubt, but in his heart, he already knew it was the truth. "He's been manipulating you from the start, Austin. You were just a pawn in his hands." Victor had no sympathy in his voice. It was just cold, brutal truth. Austin took a step back, gripping the edge of the table to steady himself. It was getting harder to breathe, but he knew he couldn't retreat. He needed to know more. "But why are you telling me this?" he asked, trying to sound confident, even though his heart was pounding. Victor laughed. A dry, empty laugh. "Because you already know more than you think, Austin. All these manipulations, betrayals, it was all part of John's plan. You were his pawn, but now, you have the chance to understand why." Austin felt his hands tremble as memories flooded his mind. His recent conversations with John, his suspicions, all those moments that had seemed so harmless. And now he understood. It had all been a game. But why hadn't he seen it sooner? Suddenly, the door to the room swung open. Austin turned, and there, standing in the doorway, was John. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look apologetic. Just cold, calculated. "Austin," John said in a low voice, "you've always been my friend, but you never realized just how much you were living in my shadow." Austin couldn't speak. His heart pounded in his chest, and his mind was racing with questions. "You want revenge for what I did?" John asked. His eyes were merciless, like stars, burning, distant, untouchable. "Don't bother. This is only the beginning. You thought this was all about your wife? No, Austin. This was always about you. Austin felt his legs weaken beneath him. He was standing in front of his friend, the man who had betrayed him in ways he never imagined. John took a few steps closer, smiling. You never saw it before, but now, you'll finally understand. I was your true enemy all along. And right now, in this moment, I've already won. Silence filled the room. Only Austin's heavy breathing could be heard. He stood there, realizing that every hope he had clung to, every belief in truth and justice, had been an illusion. John had already won. And Austin, he was just another piece on his chessboard. But then, behind John, a shadow moved. Larry, the bartender, the man who had once been on Austin's side, stepped forward. In his hands, he held a dark object. He didn't say a word. He just looked at John. And in his eyes, Austin saw something he had never seen before. A look that couldn't be mistaken for anything else. The look of a man who was about to change everything. Austin didn't understand what was happening, but what he saw next was a shocking twist. Larry stepped toward John and, without hesitation, pressed the dark object against his throat. You thought you won? You can't fix this. Larry's voice was eerily quiet. Austin stood there, silently watching. This was the moment when his entire reality shattered, when he had to face the fact that he truly didn't know who his real friend was. And one question lingered in his mind. Had this all been just a game? Or had it spiraled into an even greater catastrophic finale? Larry's final words only confirmed that nothing in their world was ever what it seemed. He heard the last rustle and watched as John collapsed to the floor. What would you have done with the wife if you were in Austin's place? Would you have forgiven her betrayal?